What's going on? All thanks for tuning in once again. Usyk does it again. Undisputed three-time champion, two at heavy, one at cruiser. What a phenomenal performance. Definitely number one in this era. One of the best of all times. I believe that, he doesn't really have anything to prove going forward. If there's any fight that I want to see him fight, it is Jai Opetaia. I reckon that if Opetaia gets all the bouts at cruiser, Usyk may be interested in becoming a four-time undisputed champ. These other fights at heavyweight, you got Kabayao, you got Parker. I don't know if Usyk sticks around for those two fights, but well done on Usyk's part. He definitely showed the world that he is, the pound for pound number one, without a doubt. You can't take him off the number one spot now. So Daniel Dubois, I was very shocked just of his heart. I thought that he had gotten past the triple knee name. A lot of people call him triple knee, and I thought that he couldn't. I thought that he could have continued. But it seemed like he gave up. He did get dropped. I know it was a heavy shot. I know that he got dropped twice. That second punch, he gets up, he walks to his corner. It's not like he's on wobbly legs. It's not like he's concussed. This isn't Tyson Fury, round 12, getting up, unconscious for 4 seconds, against Wilder. This is a guy fighting Usyk, a guy that does have pop on him, does have a shot on him, he does have a punch on him, but I thought that Daniel could have continued on. Obviously, he knew that he couldn't really answer to Usyk. Usyk was countering him from round 1 to round 5. He was countering with the straight shots. I mentioned that, Dubois couldn't handle the straight shots. He just doesn't have head movement. Daniel just doesn't have head movement. Dubois is, he had his one chance to beat the guy at the top, one chance to become an undisputed champ, and he couldn't do it. He did try. He didn't try hard enough, in my opinion. Like I mentioned, he couldn't. He could have continued, but he decided not to. And I think it's purely because he knew that he couldn't answer to Usyk. Usyk was just too good. Dubois is a guy that likes to duke it out, punch for punch, but he's a guy that likes to trade with guys that are right there. Usyk's a guy that moves around in and out of the pocket, and we saw a lot of this. Dubois' key in this fight was to go to the body. He didn't go to the body. I mentioned that he needs to go to the body, especially with the left hand, with the lead hand. He was head hunting with the right hand. Far too predictable, no head movement. And Usyk just tore him apart, like I predicted, that he'll knock him out again. So, this fight was just a one-sided domination, dominated the full fight, in my opinion. I never gave any rounds to Dubois. Usyk just had a counter. He was always countering him. He was always getting him with that left hand. Dubois was pushing him back a bit, but Usyk answered every time. So Usyk is the number one heavyweight of all time. That's yet to be decided, but definitely, he does go in the record book as a 3-time undisputed champion. No one's done it. He's the first to do it. He's definitely a Hall of Fame without a doubt. One of the greatest heavyweights of all time, like I said. And his movement was just far too superior. I mentioned that he wouldn't be slowing down. I never saw him slowing down in his previous fight. A lot of people were saying Father Time will catch up to him. He wouldn't be able to move the same. Daniel Dubois, he's a changed man. He's not a changed man. He just doesn't have any head movement. Once he gets hit enough, with enough straights, enough pressure, it just seems like he folds. You know, when he folds under pressure, when he knows that he doesn't have answer, where he can't just throw everything into one punch, he can't set up the punches. It seems like he just takes a knee. You know, he just gives up. So Dubois, you know, obviously he can make a comeback. He's still young. You know, 26, I believe. Usyk, 38. You know, what a inspiration. You know, saying that 38 is still young. That's something that I took out of this fight. You know, 38 is still young. Um, you know, keep pushing forward, keep going hard, keep trying. You know, don't give up. And Usyk said, you know, discipline. Discipline is key. A lot of people are motivated with money and things like that. You know, motivated with all sorts of things. You know, Usyk says discipline is key. So I'm going to try to stay with that. You know, being disciplined. Um, Possibly try to get a 10-miler in. You know, get a 10-mile run in. But other than that, you know, Usyk showed greatness. Beat all these UK fighters, you know, back to back, and it wasn't just a win. You know, it was Tyson Fury. That first fight he could have got stopped. Second fight he runs away with the fight. Joshua could have got stopped in the first fight. Um, you know, happy to see the bowl, and now Dubois, you know, just basically iced them. You know, basically took him apart. You know, tore him apart, dropped him twice. Usyk is by far the number one heavyweight. Like I mentioned, if there's any fight that I want to see, it's Usyk versus Opatai at cruiser. I think that Usyk will be interested in that if Opatai can get all the bouts. But at heavyweight, I don't think he really has anything to prove. Sure, there's Kabayao, Otama, Joseph Parker, but Usyk is just, you know, on another level, in my opinion. I will break down those fights, you know, if those fights do get made. Obviously, you know, Parker's had a good run. I believe his shot is next. So if that fight gets made, I'll definitely do a breakdown. But other than that, you know, 38 is still young. Much respect to the champ, Oleksandr Usyk, you know, showing everybody why he's pound for pound number one. You know, can Crawford beat Canelo? You know, there's another question. Can he become the second three-time undisputed champ? You know, this era has been all about these, you know, bouts, you know. And Usyk, I believe he wants to break those records. So hopefully he sticks around and hopefully he does end up fighting Opatai, because I believe that that will be the only challenge that Usyk will really have his hands tied with, you know. But like I said, if these future fights do get made, I will do breakdowns. Thanks for tuning in. Leave your take on it, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.